Back in Brussels, and we're here for a plenary session of the European Parliament, and one of the things that's just come up is a big change to the agenda concerning what's happened in Japan, the terrible things that have happened in Japan. I'm with Nick Griffin, who's the MEP for the North West of England, of course. Nick, it's quite a major event what happened in Japan a few days ago, a week or so ago. Huge ramifications for energy, the economy, all kinds of aspects here that we're going to touch on. What's your take on it?
Well, certainly as far as this place is concerned and our work here, it's already very clear that the Liberal left, which really has a huge amount of clout here, is using the tragedy in Japan, and in particular the problems they had at the nuclear plants, as a way of further demonising and bashing the concept of nuclear power. And they're going hell for leather for that. Mm-hmm. They're exploiting it. If you actually look at the figures, if you can imagine, if that had been a conventional coal mine overwhelmed by a tsunami, there'd have been 150, 200 miners down there drowned.
Yeah.
And as it was, this plant was hit by an earthquake and a tsunami, and they've got about as much surplus radiation floating around there as you get when you go to the dentist and have an X-ray.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite phenomenal how those designs, I mean, they're 40-odd years of age now, those designs have within them a tolerance to withstand that kind of abuse. I mean, the buildings in Japan, in Tokyo, they took a hell of a battering. They're quite good engineers, aren't they, the Japanese? Well, they're no fools.
Yeah, no, sure. It's really quite remarkable. And that plant's 40 years old. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly state of the art.
No.
When I first heard it happened and you saw this thing exploding, I thought, well, now it is going to become really hard to convince people that nuclear energy is the way forward. There's going to be a switch against it when you've seen that. And the answer is to say, look, you can build something like that in Sellafield because it's not on an earthquake fault and it's not in a tsunami zone. But that was sort of initial reaction. Now you see that actually, despite all that damage, a catastrophic damage on a scale you cannot imagine. Although it's a serious problem, there hasn't been a meltdown, a terrible leak. This massive molten radioactivity isn't plummeting towards the Earth's core and about to blow us all to kingdom come. It's actually, in safety terms, remarkably, despite everything, it's a very minor problem. And rather than using it to knock nuclear power, the actual answer should be to say, look, you can subject an old nuclear plant to two of the biggest disasters you can think of, and there still isn't a really serious risk to human health. Perhaps there's a serious risk to a few of the men working there, which is a tragedy, but in terms of death rates, the number of men who died horribly and over centuries and still die today in coal mines and copper mines far, far exceeds the death toll in nuclear power.
Yeah. There's an issue been knocking around at one or two of the forums on some of the main news television programs that perhaps the Japanese shouldn't, with their history of seismic activity, have nuclear power at all. I would disagree with that, and especially some of the British experts that have said that the Japanese shouldn't have had that kind of reliance on nuclear power. At least in Japan there's a stable society, isn't there? We have a problem with our society becoming more and more unstable, and I would say that the Japanese and perhaps other countries in the world could possibly argue with the case with Britain, with our the amount of terrorists that we've got running around the country. We're perhaps not safe ourselves, are we, in a sense?
Yeah, this is I suppose, the worrying thing, that obviously most nuclear plants, there is a safety angle, although the really quite well-established technology of molten salt reactors are such that if the core is cracked and exposed, the stuff just freezes. It doesn't go anywhere at all. It's extraordinarily safe. But yeah, there is a worry that you can point the finger at the Japanese and say, oh, you're so stupid building a nuclear power station near a major earth crust fault. And equally, they could turn around and say, well, when you build a nuclear power station, did you not think that sooner or later some Muslim terrorist might fly a plane into it? Because that's the kind of thing, the risk that our society runs on account of what the political elite are doing.
Yeah.
So we do have to take that into account. But I think there was a fascinating thing actually in The Guardian, day before yesterday. I did commented on a tweet. George Monbiot, who's I'm sure you and a lot of listeners will know, is a really hardcore, long-established, self-opinionated deep green. with whom I've had correspondence and discussions and a crossing of swords some years ago, actually. And Monbiot for years has been there on the green position, opposing nuclear power. In the last few years, he's come to the position, well, actually, as the energy crisis bites, peak oil hits, peak gas and so on, everyone's going to turn to coal as a bigger source of energy. That's far worse in many ways than nuclear power. And therefore he'd become neutral. And on the 21st of March, he wrote a very brave, actually, considering his position, article in The Guardian, entitled, Going Critical, How the Fukushima Disaster Taught Me to Stop Worrying and Embrace Nuclear Power. And when I first saw the headline, I thought this is a piece of satire. But he actually is genuine. He says, I'm no longer You'll not be surprised to hear the events of Japan have changed my view of nuclear power. I'm no longer nuclear neutral, and I'll support the technology. And he says, worth quoting, a crappy old plant with inadequate safety features was hit by a monster earthquake and a vast tsunami. The electricity supply failed, knocking out the cooling system. The reactors began to explode and melt down. The disaster exposed a familiar legacy of poor design and corner cutting. Yet as far as we know, no one has yet received a lethal dose of radiation. He then goes on to accuse the Greens of scaremongering and so on, and he concludes, yes, I still loathe the liars who run the nuclear industry. Fair play. Yes, I prefer to see the entire sector shut down if there were harmless alternatives, but there are no ideal solutions. Every energy technology carries a cost, so does the absence of energy technologies. Atomic energy has just been subjected to one of the harshest of all possible tests, and the impact on people and the planet has been small. The crisis at Fukushima has converted me to the cause of nuclear power. The key thing, I think, in that is when he says every technology carries a cost, so does the absence of technologies. And that's what the people here are doing. They're going to use this disaster, this shocking tragedy for the Japanese people, as an excuse to close down the nuclear technology avenue, saying that way we take no risks. They're taking enormous risks. We've got a planet of billions and billions of people and not enough energy to produce the food to feed them, or the houses and the heat to house them and to look after them, and not having replacements for oil, high density replacements for oil, is going to lead to human catastrophe on an unimaginable scale, and wind farms just do not cut the mustard. It's either nuclear power or actual disaster.
You're quite right in anticipating that kind of scope of the debate, that kind of slant. It's rather ironic, really, that you remain one of the only people to be banned from Sellafield in your constituency. When you tried to visit, they deemed your visit a risk to safety, did they not?
Yeah,
Which just shows how unstable this country's society is.
Yes.
When an MEP can be banned from visiting, but they're probably at this moment encouraging visits from mosques and madrasas.
I expect
ridiculous.
So. Actually, you say I'm sort of anticipating what the left and the Liberals here are going to say. It's not anticipation, they're doing it already. This is a report from the Spinelli Group, which is a sort of Liberal left fraction within the party. The Brit on its governing body is Andrew Duff, the Liberal Democrat.
We know who he is, yes.
And the Spinelli Group here, energy challenges after Fukushima. This was just issued today, and they're now saying, we need a broad public debate on nuclear energy. They're not saying they want a debate, actually. They just want it slagged. Strong support for sustainable alternatives and binding targets and new legislation to speed up the phasing out of Europe's fossil fuel dependency. So they're saying we're not going to have nuclear power. We're going to phase out fossil fuel even faster, and we're going to feed the planet on thin air. Utter madness.
Well,
but there they are. That's the Liberals for you.
They are. So we've got that to look forward to a bit later on. Surprising that there was no resolution pushed forward on Libya. We've had a last few weeks about the crisis in North Africa, I think very much because it affects the French with Tunisia and the Italians obviously as well, with the amount of immigration, the spill-off coming from those areas. Surprising that we never had a bite on Libya. No one put forward a resolution on that today.
I'm surprised. I'm disappointed, frankly. All we've had at the very start of the voting session today, during the President's announcements, he made a short reference to the fact that various European Union powers were now engaged in the action against Libya and so on. And all I was able to do was to shout out, why didn't you go and bomb China then? which,
that's one of my stock answers, isn't it?
which did attract some notice and a little bit of sympathy from some of the other nationalists. But that's it. No debate, no discussion, not even votes. We can't even give an explanation of votes. I say disappointed because I really wanted the opportunity and was going to take the opportunity to point out the appalling hypocrisy in this place. Again, coming back to the Spinelli group, who in this, although they're a Liberal faction, they echo the position of the whole Parliament virtually without exception, other than the handful of nationalists. I believe even UKIP are happily in favour of interfering in the rights of the sovereign state of Libya. And the Spinelli group here, you just find it, talking about Libya on the Arab revolt. This is the conclusions of the Shadow European Council on the Arab revolt. They right at the start say, from the beginning it has been clear that these revolts are about freedom, democracy and the strive, for a better life, fight against poverty. No, it's not. These revolts were organised, financed, the people trained by the CIA and by various foundations run by George Soros and people like him to overthrow despots who at least have brought some kind of stability to the Middle East, to create so much chaos that the Americans and Western powers can go in and seize the oil. And one only needs half a minute with a blue card to interrupt some pompous oath self-congratulating themselves about how this is all about stopping the massacres of civilians, when they've done nothing about China. They're not bombing Saudi Arabia for shooting down unarmed protesters in Bahrain. As you know, the protesters, the rebels in Libya, are armed, and they were shooting policemen and burning down police stations. It's not for us to interfere, but you can understand a state. I suspect that if a group of people in Suffolk suddenly attacked police stations and seized control of air bases, I suspect that David Cameron would do more than complain. I think he'd use force against his citizens, just as has happened in Libya. But the hypocrisy here, when they bang on about that, while in Bahrain, protesters who don't carry so much as a pea shooter are being massacred by Saudi Arabians, and in the Yemen as well, it's deeply revolting. And I did want a chance to have a go, but strangely, nothing at all. I guess that by the time the plenary session comes around in 2 weeks' time in Strasbourg, that it will be on the agenda, and there, us nationalists, we will have our say.
Yeah. I mean, I take the view that the staggering hypocrisy here is that the very same people who point the finger at you, and indeed me, and call us Islamophobes and racists and whatever, the way that they can interfere and seek to tell other people what to do in their life. Who are they to tell the Arab peoples how to run their lives and how to run their affairs? Who do they think they are to say that they know best? And it really is absolutely staggering to witness this legislation and all these pompous fools taking the stage and denouncing Gaddafi, and this is the very same people who a few months ago were cuddling up to him and signing various contracts. It's astonishing, isn't it? Yeah,
indeed. And there was a photo shown in the last Parliament session, actually, of various people, including Van Rompuy, the big cheese here, literally hugging Gaddafi just a few months ago, and now they claim to themselves the right to applaud the Americans, the Brits and the French and so on when we go in, and they condemn the Libyan government for shooting in warfare armed rebels. Well, warfare is rough, that happens, but they seem to think it's quite all right for us to fry alive whole columns of poor young conscripts who've been sent into battle. That's okay. It's revolting, it really is. And then they go with this, the Americans, as always, just go in with this unbelievable gay abandon that a group of Arabs come near one of their pilots as they're picking him up, and they just machine gun them. And it's sickening. It really is sickening what these people are doing.
It's not clever, and unfortunately it's not going to stop at Libya, is it? Let's be honest. You and me and others in the party, we've analysed the amount of forces, commitment they put into that region. It's not going to stop there, is it? I mean, we are looking at a potential ground invasion, I think, in Libya, and I think they'll never ever make the mistake they did in Iraq with letting Saddam Hussein survive. They're committed now to taking Gaddafi out, and it's going to be a very hard job. It's going to cost lives, and again, it's not necessarily that with me. It's not necessarily the cost. I mean, at a time when we're supposed to have measures of austerity, we're slamming these £800,000 a shot missiles in the ground when our old folk are freezing to death in the winter. It's the principle of it, the principle that we think we are so superior that we can tell other people how to live their lives. It's almost beyond belief. As I say, I'm annoyed about it. All nationalists should be annoyed about it because
I think a lot of people are annoyed about it, actually. The figures in the United States are that about half the population approves of Obama doing this. Now, normally at the start of the war, the figure is 70%. Whether it's Korea, Vietnam, first Gulf, second Gulf, it's always about 70% swallow what the mass media tell them and go along and say, yeah, gung-ho, go get them. And it's only one thing that starts to go wrong that it switches, and every president who tries it then ends up, with egg all over their faces and out of office. And this one, there's much lower public approval for the war in the United States. The few figures published in Britain, again, show it's almost a balance. There's a huge block of people who instinctively just get it, that this is unjust, wrong, deeply, deeply foolish and counterproductive, that it's going to stir up a further, it's not a hornet's nest, it's something far, far worse than that, just wave of loathing against the West and Westerners, against us, against ordinary people for what the political elite are doing. There's an interesting thing that Russia Today carried the other day. This is a satellite TV channel, rather like Sky, but with a Russian bias, which actually means that they look at the truth and they tell the truth sometimes. I really do recommend that people watch it. And there was a piece on Russia Today, while they were with various things there, the balance is quite remarkable, where they're showing things that the Western TV stations don't show. But something very important came out. They said that the reason that the Arab League leaders have suddenly backed off and are saying, oh, this is going too far, is the fact that they've been absolutely shaken by the waves of hostility right the way across their countries from the ordinary public against the involvement of the West in Libya. So it's already there, it's going to have huge unforeseen costs, and our public, our people, are the people, of course, we're really concerned about, already about 50-50 against this war. That'll shift very, very rapidly over the next few weeks. One or two further problems and so on. The realisation that Cameron and co either don't know what they're doing or are doing something really deeply wicked and foolish. That'll sink home, and we're the only peace party. There's no one else. That's
exactly right, isn't it? The so-called Islamophobes and racists are the only people
saying don't go and kill Arabs and Muslims.
Whereas you've got Obama, who actually got in on the basis that he was going to pull out of Iraq. Has now gone into Libya. Quite astonishing how these people get voted in time and time again.
It really is.
The peaceful Clegg, the anti-war, the hawk Clegg, is bang on board with this invasion of the Middle East and North Africa.
I saw him the other day in the House of Commons, sat right next to David Cameron, where Cameron's doing his two-bit great military leader, man of destiny type thing, and Clegg's just sat there nodding a bit and grimacing and squirming as well. Obviously deeply uncomfortable, but if he was that uncomfortable, a man of principle, he would simply say, this is unacceptable. This is another thing I wasn't elected for. It's one thing to turn over and betray students. That's bad enough. But to actually, having been elected on a peace basis, then to go supporting horrible wars which are going to kill huge numbers of innocent people and, as always, put our own servicemen and women and civilians back at home at risk. It really is horrible. But I think a lot of people get it. There's one thing I'd like to mention, again, for readers to have a look at and publicise it. If people Google Dr. Andrew Watt, that's W-A-T-T, I'm sure they'll find his letter to the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, where he lays out his reasons for stating that military intervention in Libya is illegal. And in particular, he says and draws a pretty good case for showing how it's in breach of the Terrorism Act. Terrorism is designed to influence the government or an intergovernmental organisation, or to intimidate the public. It involves serious violence against a person and property. It involves the use of firearms or explosives, and action includes outside the United Kingdom. Cut and dried. Prima facie a case against David Cameron for breaking the terrorism laws.
And Nick Clegg.
And as I say, it's a letter from Dr. Andrew Watt, and I'd urge all viewers, whether British National Party members or not, to get that on the internet, to have a look at it, and to turn it into a letter to their local paper and get it in there, and let's start to put pressure on these warmongers.
Well, we've probably got about 5 minutes left. One thing I want to talk to you about, because it affects me as well, is the ruling yesterday from the High Court in London, concerning the attempt by the so-called Commission for Equality and Human Rights to have me and you put inside.
And Tanya Lumby, of course.
And Tanya, yes. And to have...
you and I deserve to be put inside, let's face it.
Well,
Poor
I
Tanya
don't know about me.
I
don't know about... No, well, Tanya was an appalling case, and she did take it particularly hard. There was no reason to drag that lady through to that, and she held up to it very, very well. I spoke to her yesterday and told her that she got all of her costs in full, as I got all of my costs in full, and you pretty much got all of yours as well. Tying this in with the European parliamentary business, has it affected your ability to function as an MEP?
Yes, indeed it did. You said it was a ruling. Actually, this was a landmark ruling, and this was the final, the cherry on the icing on the cake. The Equality Commission intended to destroy us. They seriously set about an action which was intended either to divide us down the middle and rip the party apart, or to bankrupt us, or to seize our assets. It was designed to totally destroy us, and we beat it. 70 tax-funded lawyers, a budget of £70 million a year, and we beat them. It really was David and Goliath. It's a fantastic achievement, and the utter silence of the mass media should tell our people really all they need to know about. There were doubters and knockers and wreckers and the state plants and so on, all there saying, oh, we got into this terrible mess and now it was going to destroy us. They got into this mess. They tried to take us on. We didn't bow down. We didn't surrender. As you know, we fought back at considerable cost, personal cost in terms of strain, to us and our families and Tanya and so on as well. We fought back. We stood up for principle, and by God, we won. And now they're going to pay for the fact
they're going to
that we won. So it really was something quite special. Did it affect my work here? Yes, as you probably remember. I was on it. It seemed uncanny that every date they set was a hearing when I was supposed to be here. So several times I had to fly literally to and fro to do my votes and get there and then get back again. Several times I simply wasn't able to go. And so it did interfere. It pulled my attendance record down a bit, which I don't like, because we've been elected to come here a pledge of looking out for Britain's interests, and you can't do that if you're not here. So yes, it did affect things, and the sheer mental energy.
I know.
As you know, of constant day after day discussions with lawyers and different lawyers, and in the end building a really good team. And that's one of the great things we've done with this. There's just surviving and beating them. There's establishing the fact that the British and the English actually exist in law and are therefore entitled to the protection of human rights legislation, which is a huge door we've opened for the future. But also we built in the course of this a tremendous legal team. The team which actually, to start with, as you know, we had terrible problems. Hence the troubles early on with this. But the team that in the end beat the Equalities Commission, they're still there, and they've been well paid by the Equalities Commission and so on. That's really an achievement. But it didn't come without cost. And the mental energy which had to be sunk into that certainly did affect the work that I was able to do here, the work I and others like you were able to do for the party. Yes, it hasn't come without its costs, but by God, it's been worthwhile.
It certainly has. And on that rather happy note, that's where we end. We've got a vote on Japan, a debate on Japan to prepare, so we'll be back, I would say, in 2 weeks' time, this time from Strasbourg. Thank you.